Constraints foster creativity. Jensen Huang. Freedom isn't having options. Freedom is protecting optionality. Most people lose optionality quietly, not through one bad decision, but through small increases in exposure that feel harmless in isolation. This video explains how flexibility disappears before people notice it's gone. Most systems do not fail because they are illogical. They fail because they are exposed to human emotion without insulation. This is the mistake that repeats across finance, organizations, technology, and even personal decision-making. Designers assume rational actors operating under stress, even though stress reliably degrades rationality. The result is predictable collapse that feels surprising only to those who misunderstand how humans behave under pressure. Emotion is often treated as noise, something to be ignored or overcome. That framing is incorrect. Emotion is load. It is a force applied to a system. Like any load, it must be accounted for structurally. Ignoring it does not make it disappear. It simply guarantees failure when pressure increases. Systems do not break because emotion appears. They break because emotion interacts with design flaws that already exist. Stress does not create new behavior. It amplifies existing structure. Whatever a system allows in calm conditions will be exaggerated under pressure. If rules are flexible, they will bend further. If limits are ambiguous, they will dissolve. If discretion is wide, it will expand uncontrollably. Stress reveals truth. It doesn't invent it. This is why promises of future self-control are unreliable. People often believe they will behave differently next time, that they will be calmer, more disciplined, more rational. This belief misunderstands physiology. Under stress, the nervous system prioritizes survival over optimization. Time horizons collapse, urgency overrides planning, cognitive bandwidth narrows. This is not a personal failing. It is a biological reality. Systems that depend on individuals remaining calm under stress are fragile by definition. They assume the best version of the human at precisely the moment the worst version is guaranteed to appear. This assumption is so common that it goes unnoticed. People design rules that work when they are rested, confident, and unthreatened. Then they are surprised when those rules fail under exhaustion, fear, or loss. The correct approach is to reverse the design premise. Systems must be built for the lowest cognitive state they will encounter, not the highest one. They must function when attention is narrow, emotions are elevated, and judgment is impaired. Anything less is optimism disguised as architecture. This principle applies far beyond markets. Organizations fail under crisis not because their strategies are wrong, but because design authority becomes unclear. Teams fracture because incentives were never aligned for stress conditions. Technologies fail because safeguards were optional rather than enforced. Personal routines collapse because they relied on motivation instead of structure. Emotion does not need to be eliminated. It needs to be contained. Containment is not suppression. It is boundary setting. Just as physical systems use shock absorbers, buffers, and circuit breakers, decision systems must use limits, delays, and enforcement mechanisms. These elements are not signs of weakness. They are signs of maturity. One of the most dangerous myths in modern culture is that freedom and optionality automatically improves outcomes. In reality, freedom without structure increases failure probability under stress. Every additional degree of freedom introduces another pathway for error. When emotion is high, the mind seeks the fastest relief, not the best outcome. Systems that allow many choices under pressure will be navigated toward the worst one. This is why professional systems appear restrictive. They limit choices, they enforce delays, they remove discretion at critical moments. From the outside, This looks conservative or slow. From the inside, it is the reason they survive. Survival is not about making the best possible decision in perfect conditions. It is about avoiding catastrophic decisions in imperfect ones. Another common misunderstanding is the belief that experience alone will solve emotional failure. Experience can improve pattern recognition, but it does not reliably improve emotional regulation under stress. In some cases, experience increases confidence without increasing constraint. Confidence without constraint is not resilience, it is exposure. The systems that endure over long-time horizons share one characteristic. They do not trust human judgment when stakes are highest. They respect human creativity during design and review, but they remove human discretion during execution under pressure. This separation is intentional. It acknowledges that the mind is strongest when calm and weakest when threatened. When people say a system failed because of emotion, what they are really saying is that emotion was allowed to reach critical components unchecked. The failure was architectural, not psychological. Blaming emotion after the fact obscures the real issue and prevents learning. Emotion will always be present. Design determines whether it becomes destructive. The purpose of metasystems is to elevate thinking above tactics and instruments. Before deciding what to do, you must decide what kind of system you are operating. One that negotiates with emotion or one that contains it. One that assumes ideal behavior or one that plans for inevitable degradation. This choice determines everything downstream. In the next section, we'll examine speed and feedback, why faster systems feel powerful but fail sooner, and why slowness, when designed correctly, is not a handicap, but a form of protection. But none of that matters unless this principle is understood first. Systems must be built for how humans actually behave, not how they wish they would behave. Speed is commonly treated as an advantage. Faster execution, faster feedback, faster iteration. In many domains, this belief holds under controlled conditions. But when systems are exposed to continuous stress and human emotion, speed becomes a liability rather than an edge. Fast systems do not fail because they are inaccurate. They fail because they demand a level of precision and emotional stability that humans cannot sustain. Every increase in speed compresses time horizons. When time compresses, consequences feel immediate. When consequences feel immediate, emotion intensifies. When emotion intensifies, judgment degrades. This sequence is not accidental, it is structural. Speed amplifies feedback faster than the nervous system can process it. Feedback is not neutral. It is information with emotional weight. Fast feedback delivers that weight repeatedly and without pause. Each signal demands interpretation. Each interpretation consumes cognitive resources. Over time, this creates decision fatigue. Fatigue does not manifest as obvious error at first. It manifests as subtle drift. Smaller shortcuts, looser rules, quicker reactions. The system does not break instantly. It destabilizes quietly. Fast systems reward responsiveness. Responsiveness feels like competence. People feel engaged, alert, and involved. This creates the illusion of control. In reality, control requires distance. Distance allows patterns to emerge, noise to decay, and emotion to settle. Speed removes distance. Without distance, the system becomes reactive rather than adaptive. One of the most misunderstood aspects of speed is that it increases precision requirements faster than it increases intelligence. As decisions occur more frequently, the margin for error shrinks. Small mistakes compound quickly. There is less time for correction, reflection, or recovery. Humans are not built for sustained high-frequency decision-making without structural support. Expecting otherwise is a design error. This is why fast systems often feel exhilarating at first and exhausting later. Early on, novelty masks cost. Engagement feels high. Over time, the constant demand for attention erodes focus. Emotional volatility increases, decision quality declines. What once felt like an edge becomes a drain. Slowness, when designed intentionally, is not inefficiency. It is insulation. Slow systems introduce friction deliberately. They space decisions apart. They limit feedback frequency. They create buffers between stimulus and response. These buffers are not wasted time. They are recovery time. They allow the nervous system to return to baseline before the next decision arrives. Importantly, slowness does not mean inaction. It means controlled cadence. A system can act decisively at defined intervals while remaining slow overall. This distinction is critical. The goal is not to avoid action, but to avoid continuous reaction. Reaction chains are where errors propagate. Fast systems also distort learning. When feedback arrives too quickly, it becomes difficult to distinguish signal from noise. Short-term outcomes are overweighted. Random variation is mistaken for insight. This leads to overfitting behavior to recent events. The system becomes optimized for the last moment rather than the next cycle. Another hidden cost of speed is identity erosion. When decisions are frequent, outcomes become personal. Wins feel validating. Losses feel threatening. This tight coupling between action and outcome increases emotional investment. Emotional investment increases reactivity. Over time, the operator becomes psychologically entangled with the system. Objectivity declines. Professional systems recognize this risk. They slow decision loops intentionally. They batch decisions. They separate observation from action. They limit how often behavior can change. These constraints are not arbitrary. They exist to protect judgment. The belief that faster is always better often comes from technological contexts where machines replace humans. Machines do not fatigue. Machines do not experience emotion. Humans do. Systems that ignore this distinction borrow assumptions from domains where they do not apply. Speed should be treated as a cost, not a default benefit. It must be earned by demonstrating that emotional load, precision requirements, and recovery mechanisms are properly managed. Without these safeguards, increasing speed simply accelerates failure. The core meta-systems insight here is simple but uncomfortable. The optimal speed of a system is not determined by how fast decisions can be made, but by how well the system absorbs error. Systems that survive prioritize stability over responsiveness. They accept delayed gratification in exchange for durability. In the next section, we will formalize this principle by examining degrees of freedom, why adding choice under stress increases failure probability, and why removing discretion is often the most powerful form of control. The final principle that governs systems which survive human emotion is counterintuitive. Resilience increases as freedom decreases. This does not mean reducing agency or creativity. It means reducing discretionary choice at moments where judgment is least reliable. Most systems fail not because they are too constrained, but because they offer too many options under stress. Degrees of freedom represent the number of ways a system can behave at any given moment. In calm conditions, additional freedom feels empowering. It allows exploration, adaptation, and creativity. Under stress, the same freedom becomes liability. Each available option competes for attention. Each choice introduces the possibility of error. The mind, already under load, seeks the fastest path to relief rather than the most coherent outcome. This is why people often make decisions under pressure that they later describe as out of character. The character did not change. The system did. When constraints disappear, behavior defaults to emotional optimization. The decision chosen is not the best one. It is the one that reduces discomfort most quickly. Most people misunderstand optionality. They believe more options always improve outcomes. In reality, optionality without hierarchy degrades performance. When all options remain available at all times, none are evaluated properly. Choices become reactive rather than deliberate. Systems that survive do not eliminate choice entirely. They sequence it. Sequencing choice means deciding in advance when decisions can be made and when they cannot. It means separating design time from execution time. During design, freedom is high. Assumptions are tested, scenarios are explored, but during execution, freedom collapses. Rules apply. Boundaries are enforced. This separation is what prevents emotion from rewriting intent. Professional systems remove discretion at the most dangerous moments. They do not ask whether the action feels right. They ask whether conditions are met. This shift from subjective judgment to objective criteria is not rigidity, it is risk management. It acknowledges that feelings are not reliable inputs under pressure. One of the most common sources of failure is allowing emergency decisions to bypass structure. People believe exceptions are necessary to remain adaptive. In practice, exceptions accumulate. Each exception weakens the system's authority. Over time, the system becomes a collection of justifications rather than a framework. When a real crisis arrives, nothing holds. Reducing degrees of freedom also protects identity. When decisions are constrained, outcomes feel less personal. Losses are processed as system behavior rather than personal failure. This emotional distance preserves clarity. Clarity preserves learning. Systems that entangle identity with outcome collapse faster because ego interferes with correction. There's also a compounding effect to constraint. Fewer choices reduce cognitive load. Reduced cognitive load improves consistency. Consistency improves survivability. Survivability allows time. Time enables compounding. This chain is invisible in short horizons, but decisive over long ones. The paradox is that highly constrained systems often feel freer in practice. When rules are clear, mental energy is conserved. Attention is not wasted on negotiation or doubt. Action becomes simpler. This simplicity is not naive. It is earned through design. Complexity is moved upstream into architecture, so execution can remain calm. Modern environments encourage constant decision-making. Notifications, information streams, and continuous feedback increases perceived urgency. Systems that do not actively remove choices will be overwhelmed by this pressure. Reducing degrees of freedom is not about resisting the world. It is about choosing which parts of it are allowed to influence behavior. The meta-systems rule can be stated plainly. If a decision must be made correctly under stress, it must not be optional in the moment. Optionality belongs in planning. Enforcement belongs in execution. Confusing these domains guarantees failure. This rule does not apply only to markets. It applies to organizations, personal routines, and life architecture. Any domain where emotion, uncertainty, and consequence intersect will punish systems that rely on discretion rather than design. This concludes the metasystems framework. Systems that survive human emotion share three traits. They account for emotional load, they limit speed to preserve judgment, and they reduce degrees of freedom under stress. These principles are not moral guidelines. They are structural necessities. Ignoring them does not make you brave or flexible. It makes you fragile. Everything that follows in this channel builds on these foundations: control, execution, and strategy, because they are downstream expressions of these meta rules. If you internalize nothing else, internalize this: durability is engineered, not willed. If you get some value from this video, down below in the description, there's a test. You can do a test, find out where do you fit in the crypto quadrant, find the most natural path of progression, and then subscribe to the control layer. So all of this is not only theoretical, but also practical, implemented into the real life. I hope that helps. I will see you in the next one. Take care.